is the O's acquired Jonathan Heasley from the Kansas City Royals in exchange for Cesar Espinal, who is an 18-year-old pitcher in the Dominican Summer League. Put up some pretty nice numbers as a 17-year-old last year in the DSL at a 3.18 ERA. But let's talk about Jonathan Heasley and what he brings to Baltimore. He was the 10th ranked prospect in Kansas City's system as recently as 2022. He had an excellent season in 2021 in Double-A. He had a great ERA at 3.33, a 28% strikeout rate, just an 8% walk rate. Went into 2022 with a lot of helium. He made the jump from Double-A to the majors, and that 2022 season was not very good for Heasley. He had just a 5.28 ERA, so lost some of the helium that he had going into that season.
Yeah, when guys make a jump like that from Double-A to the majors, I feel like there's always a bit of possibility that something like that's going to happen where they're not nearly as effective as they were at Double-A, just because the change in level is huge. It is.
Right.
So, you know, last couple of years were not fantastic for Heasley, but he has interesting pitches, mid-90s fastball that can get a little bit higher, a solid curveball, throws a sweeper and a changeup. And the walk rate last year, even though he didn't throw so many innings this past season, was pretty down. So I think that's something that the Orioles probably liked. But, you know, something to keep in mind is that this guy did have a lot of success in the minors.
And his scouting report as that 10th ranked prospect in 2022 read that his velocity continuously ticked up since he was drafted. The fastball can now get up to 97 to 99.
Yes.
The fastball from 2022 to 2023 on average went up 1.5 miles per hour. That's good.
Yeah.
So the fastball now consistently sits at 95. He can get it up to 97 to 99. His best secondary pitch is the 12-6 curveball. On the fastball and the 12-6 curveball, he has a lot of vertical movement, as we are trying to find things that the Orioles are probably looking at here. You mentioned the slider as a potentially solid pitch and an effective changeup as well. The scouting report also noted that he had a really, really good pickoff move. He's very good at fielding his position, very good at holding runners on base, which is, I thought was kind of noteworthy because very rarely do you see that as a note in a prospect report. So he's got to be really, really good at it for that to be pointed out. But if you're looking for things, again, that Baltimore could be looking at when you were acquiring somebody like Heasley, I think it's the fastball velocity is the biggest thing for me. Again, increasing that 1 mile an hour from 2022 is huge. And I'm sure the Orioles are looking at that pitch and thinking that they can, you know, maybe get it consistently to 97 to 99 rather than just being able to touch there occasionally. And the 12-6 curveball is really good. And if you are a solid 2-pitch reliever, Heasley came into the 2022 season as a starter. He made over 20 starts in that season. I can't imagine that he is going to be a starter in the Orioles' plans. I would imagine this is somebody who is going to be fighting for a reliever role coming into spring training. But if he has 2 solid pitches that have a lot of vertical movement and the fastball velocity might be a little bit untapped, I think that kind of paints the picture of a potentially solid bullpen arm.
Yeah, I mean, he'll certainly battle for a bullpen spot. He does have one option left on his contract.
Yeah, that's big.
There's a chance that they just throw him down in the minors, see what he can do down there, and try to develop him a little bit. But, you know, with what the Orioles did last year with guys like Cano and Coulomb, you start to look at moves like these and say, okay, they've definitely got a plan in place picking up a guy like this. There's something that they've seen that maybe other teams have not, and they'll try to make him into something that he currently isn't probably. So I'm excited to see what happens to Jonathan Heasley.
Yeah, and that's honestly the biggest reason that I wanted to make sure we talked about Heasley at the top of this show, because we have kind of learned our lesson over the last couple of years that when the Orioles make what is seemingly a small move to acquire a pitcher or even just a player in general, it's usually not that small of a move.
Yeah.
And we learned it last year. You mentioned Danny Coulomb. Yennier Cano, again, was kind of a toss-in that Jorge Lopez trade. We have talked about that a bunch. Ryan O'Hearn was a very similar trade with the Kansas City Royals. You got O'Hearn for cash considerations, and then he gives you an OPS over 800 last year. So while this may not be a move that impacts the Orioles in a big way in 2024, this could kind of fall under the category of maybe a Franchi Cordero or a Lewin Diaz, where, Cordero wasn't in the organization past spring training. Lewin Diaz remained in the organization, but he just stayed in AAA as kind of an insurance option. Jonathan Heasley could turn into that. Maybe you start him at AAA to begin the season. You just try to develop him there, and you don't see him in the big leagues in 2024. But there's also a possibility that this just turns into a solid reliever at the big league level, because that's what the Orioles do.
Yeah.
So you have to talk about it.
Absolutely. And the ability to turn guys like Jonathan Heasley into a big league reliever that can be relied on is an invaluable thing as a franchise.
Yeah.
So if the Orioles are able to do that, obviously it is fantastic. So I'm just excited to see what happens.
Yeah, so we will see what the Orioles end up doing with Jonathan Heasley, how he factors into their plans. As you mentioned, probably going to be fighting for a bullpen spot in spring training. Could be in competition with guys like Cole Irvin, Brian Baker, Mike Baumann, who could be filling a similar type of role. Would have to imagine that Heasley could give you a fair amount of innings out of the bullpen. Could be a long relief type. Keegan Aiken probably in that discussion as well. So Heasley with that minor league option, it's possible that we just see him in the minor leagues exclusively in 2024, but also possible that he gets some run and just turns into a solid bullpen arm, because Mike Elias just does that. Just finds guys, makes them good bullpen arms, and here we are.